In this presentation, I'm going to talk about how to write a paper and get it published, or how to angle a paper that you've already written or more or less written and find the right journal for it. So I'm going to talk about both those processes, but this is basically about how to find a journal for your paper. Or diary of a research paper. So theoretically, publishing a paper is really a back to front process. It would be ideal to find the right journal first and then write your paper. It's not always possible to do that, but it's always really useful to have sort of in mind the kind of journal that you might be writing for, because otherwise you just have to go back and change an awful lot of it to fit with the scope and aims of the journal. So if you can identify a journal that you're particularly interested in or narrow it down to a few, that would be much better in terms of writing your paper, because then your paper will have some guidance. Because you always write for a very particular audience. So that's worth keeping in mind when you write your paper. So how do you find the right journal for you out of the hundreds and possibly thousands of journals that are out there now? How do you actually find the right journal for you and for your paper? Well, there's a simple 3-step process, really, and it is search, sift, and select. So let me show you how you go about doing that. So first of all, you want to search. So when I say search, I mean go through databases in your library. You can search online as well, of course, but searching on your library's databases is the best way to do it, because you can do an advanced search and you can really narrow it down and get a sense of which journals are publishing the sorts of things that you're writing about. So when you're constructing your search, you've got to ask yourself these 3 questions. What is your focus? So what's the focus of your paper? What's the main story? What's the main theme? What's the core of your story that you're talking about? What are your key words, your key phrases, some of your key terms that keep coming up again and again, or that are central to the field that you're writing within? And what is your field? So is it, psychology, sociology? Is it physics? Is it geography? Is it human anthropology? What is your field? All those things will give you a sense of where you can find the right journal for you. So with your focus, you want to look at it from 2 sides, really. You want to look at the topic that you're writing about, but also the angle. So what approach are you taking towards that particular topic? With your keywords, you're going to use those in your title and in your abstract, because that is going to help people find your paper when they're looking for something on your topic. And in your field, what is your discipline? So is it sort of, as I say, psychology or human geography? And within that, what is your subdiscipline? Is there a subdiscipline within your broader subject that your paper sits within? So you have to identify all of those things, as that will really help you identify the right journal. So once you've got your keywords, and if you've got access to an online database through your library or through your employing institution, you want to look at databases like Embase or Scopus. You can use Google Scholar, or you can even find potentially a recent review paper, because that will have lots of references in and publishers that will give you a clue as to where the right journal is for you. So you can use Wiley Online Library via one of their journals. You can just get in through any of their journals that they publish. And then you want to retrieve some of those papers. Not necessarily, obviously, the whole paper, but you want to get the title, the abstract, and so that you can know which journal these papers are published in. So with each database that you look at, it will bring up page after page after page of, page after page of lots of papers that match your criteria. So it's an idea to scan the first 4 pages or so and look at any recent review articles that are in the publisher database, such as Wiley Online Library, and look for recurring journals. Are there any journals that keep coming up again and again in the list that you can identify? Okay, so do they keep coming up in, like in my area, for example, it might be that they keep coming up in Social Science and Medicine, or they might keep coming up in the British Journal of Sociology, or they might keep coming up in Sociology of Health and Illness. So make a list of any recurring journals. You might have only 1, or you might have 10 or 11. It all depends. So make a list of those journals for now and put them to one side. Okay, so when I did this for the paper that I've been writing recently on surgical site infections, I did a search exactly as I've said, and these were the main journals that kept coming up again and again. As you can see, there's quite a lot, and you find this in medicine. You often get quite a lot of journals that come up. So I got 17 titles, which I made a note of, and then I went back and had a look at some of these titles. So that was my search. I whittled it down to 17 journal titles, which, as I say, is a lot. You'll often find less than that depending on what topic you're writing about. And then I did a sifting of these journals. So I looked at the journals and I looked at the papers on the subject that I wanted to write about in those journals. And I asked myself these questions. Are these papers recent? Have they been written in like the last 5 years, the last 10 years? Or are they considered sort of quite old? So if they've anything before 2000 might be considered out of date. In medicine, it's much worse than that. Anything more than 5 years old is usually considered out of date. So is it recent? Has it been dated? Is it dated in terms of your subject? So basically what you're asking is, they were interested in the subject once but now they're not. That's potentially the case. On the other hand, it might be that your paper updates the field, so they may be interested in it. So these are the sorts of questions you need to ask yourself. Have the papers on your topic area been spread out over a number of years? Or are there pockets of time? Can you see their little sort of pockets only here and there that they've written about it? And maybe there's something else about those papers that yours won't have. So it's about, what you want to see is a certain amount of consistency. Are they consistently interested in your particular topic? Do they publish quantitative or qualitative? Is your piece of work qualitative? Is it quantitative? Is it mixed? Is it a particular methodology? Do they publish that kind of methodology? Are they only focusing on one aspect of a topic only? So, for example, in my particular paper on surgical site infection, there are some journals that just talk about implementation, and my paper is not about that, so they're no good for me. Can you find any exact matches? So, for example, in my case, I'm writing about surgical site infection specifically in the context of cardiac surgery. Can I find an exact match within that journal for my topic? What types of articles does the journal publish? Do they publish research papers, case reports, commentaries, reviews? Because not all journals publish the same kinds of papers. Is the journal open access, in which case you'll need funding for that? And what is its impact factor? Not everybody cares about impact factor, but if you're going to be submitting your paper as part of the Research Excellence Framework in the UK or something similar in another country, the impact factor might be taken into consideration. So that might be something you want to look at. So that's the sifting process. So using those principles, when I sifted my 17 journals, I whittled it down to 5. And these are the 5 I reduced it to. As you can see, 3 of them had no word limit, which is brilliant from my point of view because I write qualitative papers and that's always word heavy. They've all got reasonable impact factors. In fact, British Journal of Surgery has obviously got a very high impact factor, but surgery might be just a little bit too focused for me. And they're all open access papers, which is fine because I do, on this particular occasion, I have a budget. So from those 5, I then looked more closely at the scope of each journal and the audience that they're aimed at. And the way to find that out is on the journal website, on the homepage. They will have a section probably called something like Aims and Scope. And it's really important. Usually journals are very explicit about what they'll take in terms of topic and who they're aiming at. So there are some journals, for example, that are written for nurses by nurses. So if you're not a nurse, it's not worth sending your paper to that journal. So what's the scope and what's the audience? And that's on the journal's homepage. You'll find that quite clearly. Also on the journal's website, on their homepage, you'll find author guidelines. And that's also very important to look at because anything that doesn't fit those guidelines that's submitted usually just gets kicked back out. It doesn't get off the editor's desk. It won't even go out for review. So it's really important to look at what the style of the journal is and what their guidelines are because they're all different, unfortunately. In terms of selection, an additional technique that you can use is, you know, think about your subject that you're writing about. What papers have you been reading and where have they been published? Okay, so that can be sometimes a clue. So if you're finding lots of papers, that you're reading lots of papers in one particular journal, consider that journal for your paper. It's also very good, actually, when you're submitting a paper to cite in your references papers that have already been published in that journal. I think editors quite like that. So that can be a bonus for you. And finally, take a closer look at one or two of the papers in the journal that you've selected in more detail. You know, look at the structure, look at the language, look at the length, look at the distribution of the, you know, the word count, look at the are there lots of tables or, you know, graphs, or, you know, how is it set out? What's the style? So can you see your paper being published there? You know, are the format and tone right for you? And it's important to perhaps use a little bit of an intuitive feeling on that. Does that feel a comfortable place where you feel you can see your work being published? So from the 5 that I had from my sifting process, I chose the BMJ Open because it's medical rather than nursing. So I didn't want a journal that was too exclusively nursing, because a lot of what I'm writing about applies to surgery in the operating theatre. So I wanted something which had more of a medical audience as well as a nursing audience. So BMJ Open is aimed at a variety of health professionals, so that fits. It has published on surgical site infections in recent years, and it's been pretty consistent. It does publish qualitative research, and not just one or two, but a fair few, and consistently over the last few years. It is a prestigious journal in the UK, and it has a reasonably high impact factor. So in the next video, I'll show you how I went about putting my paper together and kept the journal's scope, audience, and formatting requirements closely in mind. So I'll see you in the next video.